Over here either.
Oh, goodness. Well, we like to usually just jump in so we don't lose any good material, if that's cool with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do
All
it.
right. All right. And
Love it. Exactly.
last name is Gomer, correct? Or
Yep.
Gomer. Gomer.
Gomer. Yep.
Got it.
Like
All
Gomer
right.
Pyle.
Outstanding. Can you sing my Kentucky home or in my sweet home in Indiana, whatever that song is for the Indy 500?
I'm sure I could. I don't know
Yeah.
if you'd want me to, but
Oh, hell yeah. Let's make it happen. All right. Well, let's get her going.
We good?
We ready over there? Okay.
You got a frog in your throat, huh?
Something's going on. I don't know.
just a sec here too.
I'm gonna gargle with some razor blades, get my good voice back. All right. Be back. All right.
Are you standing up?
Yeah.
That's
Look
cool.
at you.
I always stand when I do my Zooms. Otherwise, I end up sitting all day, and
I
that's
feel
no
like if I
good.
stood up, I would pace though. I couldn't stay still.
Yeah, I do find myself kind of
Yeah.
rocking
You
around
gotta have
sometimes.
that camera that sits in front of you so you can be active.
There you go.
Million
Make
dollar
everything
idea.
look
You should get that. All right. Well, here we go. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Empowering Entrepreneurs Podcast. I'm Glenn Harper.
Julie Smith.
What's going on, Julie?
Just hoping that frog's gone that you had before.
I don't know what the deal is. It's late in the day. Normally do this first thing in the morning, but our guest here is way out there in the mountains, so we had to be accommodating to him, which is awesome.
I appreciate that.
Well, we'd love to like to introduce our guest today. I think we got a good one. It's Dan Gomer, a middle school teacher who decided that the education system was not providing what he nor the kids needed, so he decided to do what every self-respecting entrepreneur does, and that's flipping real estate. He was able to take old beat-up properties and make them into beautiful homes that families could raise their families. From swinging the hammer to obtaining his real estate license, he's able to compete in the trifecta of real estate from start to finish. Eventually, swinging the hammer and schlepping concrete became tiresome, and he decided to focus on the real estate investor side of the business. As we all know, you do not sell a house to a buyer, you sell the American dream of home ownership to raise a family. Understanding this enabled Dan to become exceptional in his business. Now, Dan's mission is to help other entrepreneurs become the best they can be with coaching, leadership, and how to not take no for an answer. He's the founder of Dan's Home Team and Dan Gomer, the coach. Thanks, Dan, for being on our show.
Thank you guys. Appreciate the invite.
So,
Yeah.
Dan, did you build your backdrop? That's my first question.
I did. Yes.
He's got skills.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, great. Well, I appreciate you. I hope the intro established what you really do for a living, which again, it could be anything as an entrepreneur. You know, it always changes, but I think that's hopefully the core of what you try to do. Um, and we're trying to, part of the show is to try to determine, what makes an entrepreneur, where do they come from? How do they get there? What does that look like, the struggle and the dream? And we always got to go back to the beginning. And, I found a little nugget on you, and I think you're from Arvada, Colorado, which is
Arvada. Yep.
Arvada, the seventh most populous city in Colorado. And well, as I was looking that up on my Google map, did you ever climb Coal Creek Peak?
I've not climbed Coal Creek Peak. I've climbed quite a few of the 14ers out here, but I have not climbed that one.
It's right next to Crescent Mountain. I thought for sure it's on the far west side of the Rockies. I thought for sure the city. I thought you sure would be into that.
Oh, well, I do
No.
love climbing. And, like I said, I've climbed a number of 14ers. I go backpacking, all that kind of stuff. So I definitely do the Colorado thing. But, there's an endless supply of peaks here to climb. So,
Yes.
yeah.
It's funny. Some entrepreneurs they end up have to leave home and go somewhere else to find their fortune and figure things out. It looks like the farthest you got away was in Greeley, Colorado, where you went to the University of North Colorado, which is almost in Wyoming. It's so very close to there. So
Almost.
how did
Yeah.
you decide this? Did you just want to stay in the state, or you didn't want to go anywhere else? What was that impetus of that decision?
So, yeah, I mean, I did want to stay in state, but when I was younger, like middle school, I already knew I wanted to be a teacher, and it just so happened that one of the best schools in the nation for education was UNC, and so I only applied to one school and got into it, and that's where I went. And I loved Greeley while I was up there. I also spent a lot of time in Fort Collins, which is where CSU is. So that's only about 20 minutes away. So me and my brother used to hang out over there in Fort Collins a lot. And that's kind of where I got my feet wet in construction as well. I framed houses with him in the summer and ultimately got into building decks and fences, and that's what I did to earn extra income while I was in college. So
That's what we call the gateway drug, is doing manual labor with building decks and such. You get sucked in because it's
yep,
not hard once you kind of understand how to look at a project, and it's just very methodical how you do it, right? And most people are
yeah.
scared to do that, but once you figure out the method, it's cake.
Well, and it kind of opened up like a, I don't know, certain level of creativity for me. I really enjoy working with my hands. I didn't know that until I started doing this stuff. And then, so I would build stands for aquariums and, things like that. And I just realized that it was almost like meditative to be able to go into that space and use my hands to build something out of wood. And ultimately, it's turned into other hobbies and things like that. And so, very grateful for the opportunity to be able to do that.
It's just a weird question. I have a flashback when I was in middle school. Did you ever have to build your own paddle for the kids? Because I used to have the corporal punishment was administered on me with the homemade wooden paddle. Did you ever have to do that?
No, no,
Ah,
I prefer head games.
nice,
If
nice.
you can work your way into their brain, you win. So that was always my strategy.
So when you were doing the education thing, again, it's something you want to do your whole life. Is that because a family member or just something you were drawn to?
I think it's a natural, I don't know. I don't know where it came from. I've asked that question before, and I'm not sure. I feel like it's just something that it just kind of naturally has appealed to me. And when I left public education and got into real estate, I always knew that I would get back into teaching in some way, shape, or form. I didn't know what it would look like, whether it would be in real estate or something else. If I would go back and teach teachers, because I remember when I was in public education, there was no training in terms of how to be a leader, how to communicate effectively, all of these skills that I learned as a business owner that I retroactively looked back and said, man, that would have been helpful when I was coaching basketball and when I was teaching kids you know, and so I just always knew I would get back into education in some way, shape, or form. And I hope one day I'll be able to do it in that form. But right now, the cool thing is I have a real estate team and I get to teach them and run my team the way that I want to. So I get to coach and teach and everything, but this time it's on my terms. The politics are very different.
Very
Um,
different.
and so like I'm having a blast right now. I feel
Isn't
like I've
it
come full circle.
isn't it funny that the education system, they don't teach you how to be leaders and to do your own thing and be creative thinkers. It's all about doing the narrative. And it's a shame because all those kids in there, again, they don't teach you the trades. They don't teach you these things. It's like you can't learn these things. So you have to kind of go through all that and then figure it out on your own, which is a shame because you get to, I don't want to say you waste time, but you don't tap into your potentials earlier, right? So
Right.
well, that's
Yeah.
probably would be the coolest thing to go and if you could go back and do some teaching or guest speaking or something at the school to get these kids that are thinking outside the box. I don't know if they would bring you back again or if they would embrace you. I don't know which would happen.
Yeah, I mean, the cool thing is I'm still pretty tied in. I still sit on they call it the school accountability committee for the middle school that I taught at. And, my son goes to the same middle school now that I used to teach at, which is pretty cool. So still pretty tied in with everything. And yeah, I mean, hopefully one day I can help change that narrative in the schools and what it means to be a teacher and what it means to, develop as a teacher. I mean, it's hard to retain educators these days. The young people that are coming in with the energy and the ideas and whatever, they just get beat down to the point that, they last 5, 6 years and they're like, I'm not doing this anymore. And they leave, which is exactly what happened to me. And so you end up losing a lot of really good talent because they can't pay their bills. It's frustrating. New ideas are really hard to introduce. It's unfortunate, but it is the way that it is right now, but it doesn't mean it has to be that way forever.
Concur. So there you are sitting around and you're like, I got to get out of this gig. What am I going to do? So you're like, I'll just taste one house, see what it does, right? Is that how you did it?
Well, I think we have
Kind
to
of,
go
yeah.
backwards
Uh-oh.
first, though. So you have a brother, and it sounds like in college the two of you did some manual labor together. But growing up, did you mow lawns? Did you paint rocks and sell them? Did you have any of those tendencies when you were growing up?
I did have entrepreneurial tendencies. I was the kind of kid that it didn't play very well in middle school and high school, but I kind of beat to my own drummer, and I refused to dress like everybody else dressed. Not that I was like outlandish, but I was just like, I'm not going to go buy the Abercrombie or the whatever it is everybody else is wearing, right? So I always kind of just did my own thing. And I definitely had some different endeavors, to make money. But I also got my first job when, as soon as I could, which I think was 15. I got a learner's permit and started washing dishes. And so, I actually paid for the majority of my freshman year of college in cash from money I had saved from jobs that I had worked when I was still in high school. Uh,
Awesome.
yeah, one of which was tying balloon animals at restaurants for tips, which happened to be my most lucrative job when I was in high school.
I mean, how do you get started into that? Let's be honest.
I was a busboy at a Mexican restaurant, and there was a guy that was doing it. And I just started talking to him, and he's like, "Yeah, I can come in here for 3 hours and make, really good money, um, I get to talk to kids and crack jokes, and I don't have a boss." And I was like, yes, I want that. And so I went to this guy's house for a few weeks, and he just taught me how to make all these different animals, and that was it. And so I was kind of like an entrepreneur there. I was responsible to go out and find new restaurants, get on the schedule, and that kind of stuff. So
I think that's an interesting thing. Like, so this guy took you under his wing, knowing that you were going to be competition, but he's like, it's bigger than me, and he wanted to teach you, and then put
yeah,
you out there to figure out. That's pretty cool.
it was cool. Yeah.
How old were you at that time?
Uh, I must have been 17, maybe.
A minor and everything. Look at
Yeah.
you making it
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
So then you're like, all right, I got these tendencies. You start teaching a little bit, and you're like, man, I don't know about this thing. I don't like the way this is going. So you're like, I think I'll try to do some extra money. How long did it take you from doing your first gig on a flip to saying I'm done with teaching? What was that? How long was that timetable?
Well, so I knew I wanted to get out of teaching. And so I spent about 2.5, 3 years just getting really curious about what I wanted to do. And so every single person that I met, I'm like, what do you do for a living? What do you like about it? What do you not like about it? And I was just kind of checking things off the list, like, that's not it, that's not it, that's not it, that's not it. And eventually I circled back to, well, I love construction. I like real estate. Why don't I do fix and flips? And so it took me quite a while to figure out that that's what I wanted to do. And I ended up taking a loan from my in-laws. And so I was able to just quit teaching
Oh,
about
wow.
my first. So my last day of school and the purchase and close on my first flip was, within 30 days of each other. And so, you know, but if we're talking real here, we're talking about the entrepreneurial journey. You fast forward 3.5 years, and you know, just through living expenses and through, I had some really great deals, but then I had a couple that really I got my hand caught in the cookie jar, and by the end of 3.5, 4 years, all that money was gone.
Why?
So you talk about kind of the ups and downs of being an entrepreneur. It got me started down a path. I'm really grateful for it. But, I also had to have a conversation with my in-laws of like, hey, I just lost all your money.
Is that bad?
Sorry. You know,
How'd
so
that go?
Yeah.
I said,
you
well,
Well,
as
he
well
still
as they
refers
could.
to them as his in-laws,
Yeah,
so I
so
think
that's
it
good.
couldn't have went bad.
Yeah.
what's that?
I said you still refer to them as your in-laws, so not your ex-in-laws, so it couldn't have gone
Right.
bad.
Yeah. Still married, coming up on 20 years. But, they handled it as well as I could expect. It wasn't a fun conversation, but what are you going to do? And so at the end of the day, I just had to basically summarize it with, I'm sorry, but I'm going to keep moving forward, and I'm going to make sure that we, you know, I'm going to take care of this, and so it was at that point that I transitioned away from fix and flips, where you've got a lot of exposure, a lot of risk, to helping other people buy and sell real estate, which I have found to be much more lucrative. Unless you have a really big system going, it's really tough to have fix and flips as your main
Primary.
source of income. It's more of a secondary thing. And so when I that's when I transitioned then into traditional real estate, I guess you'd call it.
Yeah, those flips, the timing, the uncertainty, that's like the cherry on top. If it hits, awesome. If it doesn't, you're going to still get the ice cream. You'll be fine.
Right. Well,
So,
and that's how I got screwed on my last flip that I did is, it was just we over improved it, but there was two flips on that same street that closed like a month and 2 months before we listed, and they were both horrible. We walked through both of them. The pictures looked good, but we walked them both, and they were two of the worst flips we've ever seen. They were terrible. And so they took these massive hits when they sold. And then
mhm.
everyone looked at our property and said, well, it's the same thing. And I'm like, no, it's not. And nobody believed me. Okay, well, we just lost 30 grand. So, there's so many things that are out of your control and those kinds of short-term transactions that, those are the things that happen sometimes.
Yeah, that spectrum between a quality craftsmanship flip and just a shag and shutter is tremendously different. And if you take pride in what you do and you're doing it for because you want something that you put your name on, you're going to be over on the side of doing it very, very well. Other people just don't care. And then
Right.
you're stuck in there. You're just going to get caught. And there's nothing you can do about that. If you would have came to market first, they probably would have skipped to sell theirs for a lot more. But
Probably.
went the
Yeah.
other way. Son of a biscuit.
Right.
So now you're over here and you're not only buying and selling real estate, basically being a realtor, correct? And then is that what you're trying to do with it? And then were you doing any investment properties and renting as well, or no?
Yeah, so I started building up my rental portfolio. Basically, any extra money that I generated through the real estate sales, I was putting towards real estate. In Denver, we're, we don't have great cash flow on rental properties, but we have really good appreciation. And so I was taking that appreciation that I was gaining on the first couple that I had bought, and I was rolling that appreciation into down payments for the next property. And so that's kind of how I built up that portfolio. So yeah, so I was doing that, but my whole focus was really just on selling houses, and after what, I don't know, 3, 4 years of doing it on my own, I ended up bringing on an assistant and ended up having just a blow up of a year in 2020, which was great, which ultimately led me to burnout. Ready to leave the industry, honestly, after 2020. So that's a whole nother story.
Well, we're going to get into that too, but I think the fun part is, again, as an entrepreneur, like everybody thinks you just magically put a shingle on your door and you make $1 gajillion. They have no idea they see you today, but they don't see what you've gone through. And literally you had to pivot from, teacher to flips to borrowing money to going back and doing it a different way. And now you had to literally double down. And we call that leverage, people, when you're borrowing on speculation, which takes, what of steel to do that. Because again, you're banking on the future and you're mortgaging everything in the hill to accumulate the portfolio. And it's hard to sleep at night when you're doing that, right? But your market, your skill set, your ability. You gotta do it. If you don't go all in, it's never going to work. But then what happens?
Well, have you worked with your brother since college? I was curious if you guys kind of went in
Oh,
the same path or no.
no, he stayed in the construction industry and did restoration and that kind of stuff. So we're still close, but I've never worked with any of my brothers.
Well, so I think we have to dive into this 2020 burnout because we talk a lot about peaks and valleys and, you talk about climbing them and being at the top and then, you ultimately have to come back down. So obviously 2020, was a valley. Talk to us about it because you had to have learned and been able to pivot into something or you wouldn't be here today.
Yeah. So at the end of 2020, it was just one of those times where I don't know when it was. It must have been maybe October, November, towards the end of the year. And, I was in my office. I worked from home. I'd pop out, we'd eat dinner. I'd go right back to my office. I was not, when I was there with my kids, I was not present with them. It was just a grind. It was just a means to an end. Let's keep making money. And I knew that it was not sustainable. I knew that it wasn't something that I really wanted to continue to do. But at the same time, I had kind of set my sights on a goal, and this goal was represented me proving to myself and everyone else that I could be successful. After all the failures I felt like I had in my life, including losing money on flips and all that kind of stuff, I needed to like prove that like I could actually do something bigger than anybody expected. And so that was part of what 2020 was, but there was a cost that comes from that. That energy has to come from somewhere. That time has to come from somewhere. And it came from my family. And, one night we're sitting there at dinner and my daughter, who was, I don't know, 6 or 7 at the time, said something to the effect of, um, I think she wanted to hang out or something. And mom was like, well, dad's kind of busy. And she's like, that's all dad does is work, And that was kind of that moment where I was like, yeah, okay, I think I'm done with this. And so 21 and 22 were transitional years where I was once again trying to figure out like, okay, so, I'm looking at real estate and how do I really truly leverage myself in real estate? And I wasn't finding a good solution outside of rental properties and very long term and all that kind of stuff. And so I was just kind of getting increasingly frustrated, really. And so I've written a couple books, and I was practicing my speaking skills and things like that. And so my intention was to get back into teaching, be a coach, be some kind of teacher. I didn't really see a clear path on that, so I spent about a year and a half in limbo, and my business production went way down, and eventually, managing broker at my brokerage told me she was moving brokerages. And so a whole new opportunity had opened up with that move. And it really made a lot of sense for me to create a team. And so it was at that point that I finally saw the opportunity to leverage. And so now I'm in a position where I'm still doing production, but I'm doing a half to a third of what I was doing in 2020 in production. And then the rest of my time and energy is going into supporting and retaining and building my team. And so this is the way that I have now gotten back into the education piece of things, where I get to do the best of both worlds. I get paid really well, and I get to coach and teach and do all that kind of stuff. So I've really found like that balance between the two, which is great.
So do you think your true passion is teaching and helping, and that you've just been able to kind of circle around it, I guess, in different avenues in order to ultimately come back to it?
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, selling real estate is a means to an end.
Hmm.
It like money is not everything, but if I didn't have money, that would really suck. So,
Right.
we need money to survive. Money allows us to take vacations and do fun stuff. So, real estate provides that. But if I had all the money in the world, I would spend all my time teaching and coaching and helping other people grow. That's what I'm passionate about. Seeing somebody light up, seeing somebody find that motivation that they didn't know they had to change their life, and they go out and start doing things differently, being that catalyst. Like that's what I'm really passionate about.
Growing up, were you always on sports teams or some sort of team that's kind of, you go back, you keep talking about teams, right? Even in teaching, you had these teams. And so were you always a part of a team? And so you've always kind of just naturally, been attracted to that?
You know, Maybe it's the opposite of that. That's a good question. So I always played sports, soccer, baseball, basketball, football. I was not good at any of them when I was growing up. I played them all through high school, but I was never great at any of them. And, I never felt really supported, and I never really felt like I was part of something bigger than me. So perhaps it was that lack that actually led to me wanting to provide that for other people, because I knew how uncomfortable it was. Um, and so maybe that's where the spark came from. But then, I also coached high school basketball for 4 years, and that's a very competitive environment, especially these days, and very, really good teams, like state championship teams, and so very competitive environment. Um, and I loved the psychology of like, how do you motivate somebody? Because you can't really motivate somebody. All you can do is get them to see something they hadn't seen before so they can motivate themselves. Like I loved those aspects of it. And so I don't know, maybe that's where the spark comes from.
Do you think that no one took the time to kind of do that with you for you growing up? Maybe you had all these coaches and all these teams, even in college, I'm sure. You know, I almost think that it goes back to that balloon guy. He took a chance and kind of made you see something that you didn't see in yourself or couldn't see. And then, for whatever reason, at some point, that passion ignited for you to be able to do that for others, maybe. I don't know. Maybe I'm connecting a circle that doesn't exist. I have no idea.
No, I think that's actually pretty insightful. I've never thought about it that way, but yeah, at that point I already knew I wanted to be a teacher, but looking back at it, it's like, I never really thought about how he had taken a chance on me and he invested in me without saying like, okay, so you got to pay me $300 to teach you how to do this. He was just like, here, I'm going to show you how to do this, so that you can do it for yourself. Um, and he might have I think he took a cut or something when I actually
Well,
started
absolutely.
working.
Of course, he took a
Of
cut. I
course,
mean,
yeah,
self-respecting business owner wouldn't.
yeah,
It's funny on that. You people, usually entrepreneurs, they get to the point where you're at a lot later in their journey, and that journey is, well, I've just about done everything I can do. What's the next? Well, I want to give back for you. And I think that's, when you see somebody's eyes light up when they're buying their first house, I mean, it's the coolest thing ever because you're just helping somebody achieve something they didn't know they could achieve. And as you're coaching somebody, like you said, you can't make them do it. If you can get in their head, like you said, and help somebody that is incredibly ordinary become extraordinarily, you know, way better than they ever thought they could. That is like got to be the coolest thing to do for people. And the only way you do that is you have to mentor and you have to want to help. You just don't do it because you have to, because you want to. And you got there a lot quicker than most people, right? Most people don't do that way down the
But
line.
on
See,
on that note, talking about, you're obviously giving back and being a great mentor to so many people. Do you think you had a mentor throughout this process? Someone who's kind of been there that's kind of given some advice and support that has helped you get to where you are?
I mean, I've had lots of mentors, I don't feel like I've ever had that person that was like, hey, like I see you and I'm going to pour into you, right? Um, and I don't know how many people ever get to experience that, maybe that's a pretty rare opportunity. I don't feel like I ever had that. But I did have, people who were a lot further along down the path who, um, gave me their tools and their tricks and their insight and, all that kind of stuff. I mean, I spent 10 years at my last brokerage and I had some really good mentors there. Um, but I had to be very, very proactive and like go to them and be like, I need your help for this. I need your help for this. And then they would help out. But I don't feel like I ever had that mentor that was just like, I see something in you, like, let's roll with this. I also am a firm believer in coaching and therapy and all of those kinds of things. And so I've also always leaned into that. So I almost always have some kind of coach or therapist or somebody who I'm working with closely one-on-one to break through certain barriers and that kind of stuff.
which again is the cool thing is that you didn't get those things on your journey from anybody else, but you recognize how important those are, and you just want to be that resource for others, and that's why you teach and coach and all, mentor, because that's where the action is, right? That's the fun part, is
Right.
getting people to do
Absolutely.
something they didn't even know they could do. Oh,
Right.
that's so, and then that gets back to the whole point of, when you're doing these types of things, I guess you live in Highlands Ranch now, which is just South Colorado.
He may come knock on your door someday, so I'd be make sure your
Come on,
ring's on.
I got
come on
people.
over.
I got people. No, I'm sure. I love Colorado. It's awesome. But I'm intrigued by the Hazards Gingerbread House. Do you ever go to that place?
Hazard's Gingerbread House.
Yeah, it's
This is
like
what happens when you have a Google
that's
Master
like
over
a
here.
top five thing to do in your town. I thought for sure you'd be going to that.
It's in Highlands Ranch.
Yeah. I mean, Google says
It
it
might be
is.
in Highlands Ranch, Texas.
No,
We're just
no, no.
unsure.
I was very good about that. I thought, well, that'd be a popular one you go to.
And well, I'm gonna have to go check that out. I
Hazards.
have not
Yeah,
been
who
there.
knew? Are you a big Broncos fan, or are you?
Oh yeah.
All right. Do you follow the Buffaloes, or who do you do for college? Is it your old team, or is
You know,
it?
it's funny. I actually don't follow college sports
How about
really
that?
at all. Obviously, with prime time coming to see
Yeah,
you,
the best.
yeah, yeah. So I followed that a little bit, but really the Broncos and I kind of loosely follow the Nuggets as well, but Broncos are kind of my go-to.
Gotcha. If you could find a client or somebody that you could mentor or coach, when you just look out in the world and go, man, if I could just get in that guy or that chick's head and help them, I would
Mhm.
really change their life. Do you have like a dream person? You're like, man, that's one person I would just love to talk to and mentor them.
One person specifically or a
Yeah.
type of person?
Probably well, I always like what's your dream one? Who would you love, man? You like everybody has like the fantasy person, man. If I could just get in front of them, I could really rock the world. Who do you think that would be, or is it more like a group of?
Yeah, fortunately, I feel like I've got some of those people on my team already, for different reasons. But, if I really had to like pick a person, it would be that person who is ready to make changes in their life, self-reflective enough to be able to see things that they haven't seen before, teachable, coachable. That person that's like ready to go do something, but they just need the right tools. And
They're
they're like,
hungry.
oh, got it. Okay, so I hit the nail with the hammer. All right, cool. Oh, you've got a hammer. Cool. Here, let me, you know what I mean? Like that person. Um, that's really about it. I mean, I love the people that I have on my team because there's a number of them that were in the same position that I was in where they're trying to figure this out. They're trying to make money. They want to make this real estate thing work. They don't know how to do it, but then they start plugging into, all of these things that we're doing as a team, and all of a sudden their business starts growing. And I'm like, man, they're in their mid 20s and they're, on their way to creating something really cool for themselves. Like that's it, you know just someone who's ready to go kick some butt and ready to listen and,
Somebody hungry
appreciation
and
of the journey.
somebody's hungry and curious, probably, right? And
Yeah.
passionate about it.
Yeah.
So we talk a lot about peaks and valleys, and obviously we always think the learning comes from those valleys that helps us get to the peaks, obviously. If there's a nugget or a shortcut that you could give to our listeners that you've learned in the valley that just as a reflection was really impactful to you, could you provide one?
Yeah. Um, so I actually just mentioned it a second ago. It's the journey. So one thing that I feel like I have been fighting against my entire career and my entire life is it's not the way it should be. It's not the way I want it to be. Well, as soon as this happens, then if only this, that, right? So I'm a very futuristic thinker. So it's really easy for me to get caught in this cycle of forgetting to celebrate and honor the journey and honor the space that I'm in right now and show gratitude for where I'm at right now, because it's really easy for me to be like, yeah, that's great, but there's that thing over there. And then I get to that thing and I'm like, yeah, that's great, but there's that thing over there.
Isn't that just an entrepreneur?
I think
No,
so.
that's everybody.
I think so, right? And for me, that really bit me in the butt because it made me unhappy, miserable, And what I have learned now, and what I'm really practicing this year is specifically is number one, simplify. Um, there are so many tools out there that, oh, this tool will fix everything for you, but it actually creates four more problems that you need four more tools for, that create nine more problems that you need nine more tools for, and you end up getting nothing accomplished, but you got a lot of great tools. So simplify, right? And then the other thing is just enjoy the ride. So when I'm in the valleys, when I'm in the struggle, when I'm uncomfortable, what I've been practicing is just experiencing it. And I know that sounds crazy, but just like being in it and be like, That's interesting. That's interesting. All right. So this is part of my journey. Instead of trying to control it and change it and it has to be this way, should be that way, just experiencing it. And for me, that's been really powerful because it allows me to accept the challenges and accept the difficulties for what they are, just part of the journey. It's not good, bad, or otherwise. It's just part of the journey. And so just lean into that. So, if there was an entrepreneur that came to me and was like, hey, how do you how do you push through the valleys and, all that kind of stuff. That's what I would say is just enjoy it while you're down there. There's beauty in the valley. There's beauty on the mountaintop. Like just be present and keep moving forward.
I think Coach Truss of the Buckeyes, he said, have the attitude of gratitude, and
Yeah.
that will get you through anything pretty much.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you've wrote 2 books. Is that what
Or
4 books?
Yeah, yeah. So
I
I've
know
got
of.
one personal development book. I've got one real estate book, and then I've got one book that they call it an anthology. So it's a series of, I think it was like 30 something authors that all contributed a chapter. But some big name people, Les Brown. I don't know if you know him. Um, Brian Dawkins, he played for the Eagles, so there was so that was a really cool project. I got to meet with them like once a week for a few months and put this thing together, which was kind of cool.
So how does that come about? So you're doing flips, you're doing real estate, you're building a team, and then you're like, oh, by the way, I'm just gonna get all these people and have them help me write this book. I mean, walk me through that because that's kind of to me, that's a little in left field.
Sure. Yeah. So uh, where it started was when I would get really like stressed. Um, Sometimes I would just like ideas would pop into my mind. And so writing became an outlet for me. And what I would do is I would just write these little essays that are basically just brain dumps, and ideas that would come up. Maybe somebody did something that was really frustrating. And I'm like, why would somebody act like that? And I would just start like writing. And so I ended up with all of these essays essentially that were completely discombobulated. And, like I said, one of my big things is about personal growth and development. I mean, there's, when we look at, growing a successful business, in my opinion, mindset is everything. It's the foundation for everything. And so if you're not growing your mind, if you're not doing personal growth and development, that might be woo woo or whatever, like good luck. It's the foundation. So anyway, I ended up going to this thing. It's called PSI seminars, PSI seminars, personal. It's kind of similar to a landmark, that kind of thing. And really changed my perspective on my own life and what I'm capable of and all of those things. And ultimately it led me to come back to these essays and be like, I think if I put some structure to this, I could actually turn it into a book. And so that's where it started. So my book, it's called I'm Full of It and So Are You, is just it's just kind of a brain dump.
So what I gather though is this book came from your valleys. And ultimately the book
Yeah.
is I mean the culmination of it is the peak. I mean obviously and being able to have self-awareness and reflection to be able to come to that point, but all of these essays came from some sort of valley that you were in or on whatever you want to call it. And so, I mean, the attitude of gratitude, like being grateful for those experiences and allowing others to learn from them the way you learned from them. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I would say that when you're in the valley, most people do the things they shouldn't be doing. And if you can
Easy.
not do those and do something more a little therapeutic, which again, allegedly people say if you take your thoughts and write it down, that's probably the best therapy you can have, right? Because you just got to get it out there, kind of like
Mhm.
a release of some sort. So being able to do that versus choosing other choices that would probably not be the best, that's some good advice for our listeners. Definitely don't choose those other things.
Yeah, writing for me is an outlet, but I always encourage, like when I'm coaching, I encourage people to write for exactly that reason. Number one, getting the ideas out. Like sometimes it's just, sometimes you just need a vent and you just like start throwing up on someone. How's your day going? Wow.
Let me tell you,
It's funny. I just
Right.
did that to Glenn on the way over here. So
got an earful.
Perfect. Yeah. So, to do that in writing is a little bit different because you're talking to yourself. First of all, you can be just blatantly whatever you think. There's no boundaries. And so it allows you to be as gregarious or ruthless or whatever as you want. But as you start writing and thinking through these things, a couple things happen, at least for me. Number one, you start looking at your own thoughts and you go, ooh, oh, do I really believe that? Like, is that really how I want to be? That's part of it. So it gives you an opportunity to reflect. And the other thing that it did for me, especially when I published my book, is, am I living up to the standard that I'm preaching? Because if I'm telling people you should act this way, be this way, whatever, and I'm not doing it, well, then that's a bunch of BS. So um, the more that I put these things out, I do a weekly email, all that kind of stuff. Every time I do something like that and I put it out into the universe, into the world, I feel like it elevates me to a higher standard. I elevate myself to a higher standard, I guess I should say.
So I'm going to go out on a limb and say, although I loved the shortcut you provided about leaning into the journey, I think the last 3, 4, 5 minutes of discussion is actually your shortcut. You're leaning into your journey, but you're being able to use it for good, and you're being able to be reflective, have awareness, and bring everyone with. I think that's a
Yeah.
if I were reflecting on this podcast, that would be my takeaway and shortcut from you.
Yeah.
That'd
Yeah.
be, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, go for it.
I was going to say, if I were to write a lot of stuff that's in my head, they'd probably say, what kind of psycho is this guy? And I'd have to go see a
Well,
therapist.
yours
But
wouldn't get
yeah,
published,
I would
but that's
probably don't, I'd
okay.
have to have that edited heavily. But no, I think once you get it out there and you start using it as a habit, I think probably you get some sort of flow of what that looks like. And it becomes therapeutic where you don't have to be so hard on yourself because it's not all bottled up, right?
Mm.
Just like what therapy does, right? You don't have to, you learn how to manage it instead of just vomiting it out, right? And I think that's probably the key.
So this leads me to my next question.
Yeah.
What is your superpower? I feel like we've danced all around
boy.
it. We just haven't defined it.
I can fly. No, I don't
I
know.
knew it. Knew he's got that outfit out there.
That's not where I was going, but
Um, I really think that my superpower has to do with um, I don't know, I guess I would call it innate drive to make the world a better place. It's just kind of like underpins everything that I do. And regardless of whether I'm good at it or not, I think it's that drive or motivation to just keep trying is my superpower. Ultimately, that's been, looking back at my journey, that's been the motivating factor, the driving factor that's kept me moving forward, in my career and everything. So
I think you also probably have a unique superpower of other being able to allow other people to see that in themselves.
I hope so. Yeah. I mean, that's my goal, right? That's one of the strategies. If I look back too at my journey and I think about when I had, my biggest shifts from things that other people told me, and just about every single one of them is somebody just holding up a mirror and being like, have you noticed, you act this way, you say these things, you do these things, right? And it's like, oh, wow, okay. And then your life's never the same in an instant. You're this way, then you're that way. And so, yeah, I hope that is my superpower, is helping people see that.
Yeah, I'd say the things that money can't buy. I mean, money's great. Don't everybody loves money, you get the cool stuff, but the one thing it can't buy is the ability to help somebody be the best version of themselves. And that coaching and teaching thing really does that. That's got to be the cherry on top for you, I would think.
Yeah, yeah,
And yeah, you
absolutely.
get over here and kick butt and get brutalized and you'd be stressed out to go make a living, but if that creates the opportunity to go do this other thing, which is to make a difference, which is
Mhm.
all.
Absolutely.
So this brings me to my last question. I know you were sweating, but it's our last question. What is your end game?
Oh, I love that question. So, how much time you got?
Less than 30 seconds. I'm kidding.
So, my end game is to create something that I call the playground. So I have a coaching program that I call the Playground Coaching Program. At this point, I really only do that with the people that are on my team, just from a time and bandwidth perspective. But the whole thing with the playground is I literally want to build a giant playground here in Colorado. Um, that is designed specifically to help adults. And, I kind of started the idea with like fathers and sons because I want to create generational change. I feel like if you can change that relationship between a father, son, a mother, daughter, families, a relationship, any of those kinds of things, you create generational change where the things they learn about themselves then get passed down. So that's ultimately what I want to do. But there's a lot of psychology that backs up this idea that when, especially guys, who have a hard time communicating effectively, they put the walls up and that kind of thing. There is something that happens when they're playing and when they're doing something active that allows them to open up a little bit more and communicate a little bit differently. And so I want to create this playground where you come and you play and you learn about life and stuff. So that's the next big project.
That's fantastic.
Well, I think you answered the question perfectly because you basically
There's
defined
no,
what we think is true in entrepreneurs. There's no end game. It's just what's the next thing,
there's
right?
Yeah,
always
right, right. Which,
congratulations.
which, right? Which, what led me to the enjoy the journey
Yep.
because it was like, man, the mountaintop is great. Like I said, I've climbed 14ers. I've climbed, some of the most challenging 14ers in Colorado. And the top is cool. But when I tell the stories about climbing these mountains, it's never about the top. It's always about, oh, we were on this talus field and then, I fell and then this happened and that happened. And, you know, the storm rolled in, right? It's about the journey. And so what I finally started to realize was this thing happens and it's great. And then it's done. And then it's this thing and it's great. And then it's done. And when I'm focused on that next thing, that's when things will be better. It's a losing proposition. You're going to lose 100% of the time. And when we focus on the journey that gets us there, then we can't lose. It's a winning proposition.
Every morning you get up, it's a brand new journey. It's going to be awesome.
Exactly.
Dan, I really appreciate you being on our show. I think we got lots of good nuggets for our listeners. And if you have any plugs you'd like to put in for the books or what you try to do, feel free to throw those in here now.
Yeah, I mean, I already mentioned I'm full of it, and so are you. It's on Amazon. My other book is the Sphere Marketing Handbook. So if there's any real estate agents who are looking to build their business, that's the strategy that I used to go from 0 transactions to, you know, 40 in a year, right? And did that in just a couple years. So if anybody wants that, they're both on Amazon, or if you just go to my website, dangomer.com, there's actually a couple links in there where you can just sign up for it. It'll sign you up for my weekly newsletter and you get the books for free, electronic copies. So
And
Awesome.
what's the name of your brokerage?
I'm with eXp Realty.
Well, Dan, appreciate it again. Thanks for being on the show and wish you great success.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you guys. I really appreciate your time.
Another edition of Empowering Entrepreneurs. I'm Glenn Harper.
And Julie Smith.